My wife wants a baby, but I'm afraid she will stop loving the kids we have now. When I was 15, I went to my first party. I ended up losing my virginity. I later found out she was pregnant. She wanted to abort, but when my parents found out, they were against abortion and ended up convincing her to keep the pregnancy and we would pay her for it. And when babies were born, she could sign away her parental rights and we'd never bother her. Which is what happened. She gave birth to my twin boys that I love dearly. We were pretty well off, so I had a nanny and it never slowed down my education. In college, I, 22, met my now wife, 20. I instantly fell in love with her. She was beautiful, very smart, and oddly skilled with knives. She was very caring, and sometimes into our relationship I told her I had kids, and she was fine with it. Later in our relationship, she met the boys, and they fell in love with each other quickly. We later got married at 25 and 23, and she moved in. The boys loved and cared for her. They would nap with her, and even on her periods where she would have some bad cramps, they would take turns feeding her while one lays on her stomach for the warmth and pressure. They would give her lots of kisses and hugs, and truly I was so happy to see my three favorite people get along. I'm a pale man with white hair, and my boys favored that while my wife is a dark-skinned woman. Once, my wife dropped off the boys and kissed them, and their classmates picked on them for having a black mom, and to retaliate they said she was their nanny. We talked about it, and my wife chose to never accompany them to school again. My wife has this trip that she has always wanted to go on this trip with her kids and has dreamed of this since she was a kid and went with her parents. She told me about it, and we went together to go visit the place first. She hasn't seen it in a long time and wanted to make sure it looked same as she remembered. And two, to don't trust her anymore, since the last time she suggested a place she used to love, we ended up in strip club for disabled people. She was even more excited to take the boys, and she made matching clothes for them, and boys helped her. 5 months ago, I celebrated my 7-year wedding anniversary with my wife and posted it. It was great until one of my kids' classmates found it and showed other people, and my boys started getting picked on for having a black mom, and especially one so dark. They were lashing out at my wife and saying very racist and disrespectful things to her. 2 months later, I got a call from a woman who claimed to be the mother of my children, and surely enough it was true. We'll call her B. She came back saying she wanted to check up on the boys and see how they were doing. I talked to my wife about this, and she figured it would be good for the boys to meet their biological mom. They met, and a month later, my wife's trip was approaching. The boys suggested that B comes along, but there were only 4 tickets, and this trip had been planned out and booked 3 years prior, and it would be difficult to accommodate a 5th person since for most of the events, tickets were sold out. My older son suggested B comes instead of my wife since it's a family trip. My wife started to beg and plead with them that they had been planning this trip for a long time and it was their trip. I told the boys that B would not be going on this trip. I went on a business trip for 2 the next day, and while I was away, there was a party the boys asked to go to that I specifically said no to and instructed my wife to not let them go either. The boys tried to go when my wife reminded them of what I said, and they told her she wasn't their mother and to stop acting like it. Mai repeated that it was order and she couldn't let them go. The boys blamed her for their bio mom not being able to go on the trip, and long story short, one of my boys slapped her. I came home Saturday morning as I always do because everyone is home, and they all wake up early to come greet me, and my wife would usually be making something delicious with loud music playing, and my boys would be arguing over something, and they would always run to hug me. This time I came to the house was quiet. No one was downstairs. I went to check on the boys, and they were in a bad mood, and I went to find my wife, and she was in bed just lying there. I later found out what happened and scolded the boys and canceled the trip. They begged and pleaded with me and apologized to my wife. She said there was no need to cancel the trip since I spent so much money on it. So I suggested she goes with B and the boys. She pointed out some safety concerns since we don't really know B as well and she's not exactly strong, so she forced me to go. While on the trip, I called her a lot, but she preferred to text. A week later, we got back and noticed the plants were dry, even though my wife prides herself in her garden. The inside looked exactly as it was when we left. I checked our house alarm system and noticed the door hadn't been opened since it closed when we left. I found my wife lying in her sewing room with all of my alcohol, even though she had never drunk any before, and I also noticed all of the clothes she made for the trip had been cut apart. She continued not to speak or move for the next 2 days, so I had to bathe her, but she wouldn't take any food. After some time, she started to eat and held me back when I hugged her, and we finally talked. I apologized for everything that has happened, and she accepted my apology and forgave the boys. I noticed in the 2 days that followed that she didn't really speak to the boys like she used to. She hasn't hugged them, kissed them, or made any cute comments about how much she loved them. A Friday also passed, and she usually does game nights, but she hasn't. I confronted her and she told me she wasn't their mother, and her job was to make sure they were taken care of, and she wasn't hurting them in any way. It has been like that since. The house is quiet, our relationship is back to normal, and she's affectionate towards me and everything, but she's not like that with the kids. A backstory about my wife: she has always wanted kids. She wanted only 2 kids to be specific because she didn't want to drive a minivan. Before we got married, we talked about kids, and she told me she didn't want any since she now has 2, which are boys. I asked twice after that because I have made enough, and we have a 6-bedroom house, so it wouldn't be a problem. But she gave me the same answer, telling me she already has 2 kids. Today she told me wanted a baby. I feel if I do agree, she will completely let go of the kids we have now. How should I go about this? Has anyone else who's remarried had an issue with their kids not getting along with their new partner? Update: 4 days later. I deleted my account because there was just so much being said, and I needed some time. I took the advice that everyone suggested. Here is an explanation that I didn't have before. Last school year, the boys took a trip to DC where they stayed with their friend whose uncle was dating B. They talked, and B told them how she had been looking for them and missed them and etc. Everything was going well. They were telling her about their lives and how they live, basically telling them how well off we were. And then they mentioned my wife, and she was telling me about how she was happy for my wife, but she has always loved me. It's important to note we didn't know each other's names until my parents were involved. So, reading this, it was odd. She basically told them how she has been trying to fix our relationship, but I moved on. And I guess this is where the hate towards my wife started. I arranged a meeting with B and the boys and asked B in front of them if she wanted custody. She went on a long rant about how she doesn't have any money and how she wouldn't want the boys to change their lifestyles living with her. As much as I didn't want to, I showed the boys the contract she signed and told them how she wanted an abortion and we had to pay her to keep the pregnancy. I told her since she wanted to be in the boys' lives, I wouldn't mind it, but we could have split custody and I wouldn't pay her any child support, and the boys are being cut off financially until they can earn it. So, she won't be having access to my money. She agreed in front of the boys and left saying the boys can come stay with her in DC. We haven't heard from her since. She's blocked the boys and me. Both boys will be going in to address their issues with the bullying and this whole situation. Something I should have done a long time ago, I know. She said she didn't hate me or the boys, but that trip is still something she wants to do with her kids. She still loves the boys and has told me how sad she feels when she sees them trying to call B. I know that they just want to be held by her, but I don't think that's something my wife wants to do, and I'm certainly not going to make her. I'm sending her to Florida for the moment so she can be away from this, and we can get therapy, and hopefully when she's back she will feel a difference. So, points to address. I have never hit my wife, and I truly do adore her. I have never dealt with conflicts with the kids or a situation like this, and this was all new to me. I wasn't looking for sympathy, simply a new perspective, since no one and my wife have a thing where we don't like telling people our personal problems. Thank you to those that were supportive and gave advice. I know there are other people posting updates that aren't me, but this is the real account. I have proof from screenshots I have taken of what people sent me in messages and notifications. Relevant comment from OP. Question: was the party a high school party or a college party? I'm having issues grasping why a grown-ass woman is around a large group of teenagers and sleeping with said teenagers. OP, it was a high school, was hosted by a classmate, and they also invited college students. Comment: I can't believe OP completely brushed off that one of his sons physically assaulted his wife. They're not little kids. 2 17-year-old boys could probably easily overpower her. I can't imagine how terrifying and shocking that must have been for her. I really hope she has those babies with someone else. Comment: So, if OP had those kids at 15, got married at 25, and recently celebrated his 7th wedding anniversary, that makes these kids 16, 17 years old. He made them sound like toddlers, but his racist kids are nearly adults. Comment: what in the actual fuck did I just read? So this is the end of the story. Tell me what you think about these stories in the comment section. Like and subscribe for more videos.